The Bears and the Packers are banged up, but there's no excuses. It's a black and blue division showdown, and we've got a crossover Thursday showdown, Locked on Packers, Locked on Bears, next.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow the podcast on any podcast platform. Subscribe wherever you get podcasts, plus on YouTube. We had a great squad show yesterday. We're going to be live after the game on Sunday. Wherever you get podcasts, you will find Locked On Packers, the number one Packers podcast on the internet, and the show for fans who know what happened. They want to know why and how. A Locked On Packers, Locked On Bears crossover Thursday. That's me, Peter Bukowski, Locked On Packers, Lorin Cox, Locked On Bears. Let's do it.
Welcome into this crossover Thursday, Locked On Packers, Locked On Bears podcast. I'm Lorin Cox from Locked On Bears, alongside Peter Bukowski from Locked On Packers. Thanks for making Locked On Bears or Locked On Packers your first listen today, and hopefully every single day. We're both part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the number one sports podcast network. And our crossover Thursday is presented by Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineups. And on our crossover today, we got to talk about a game that just happened 2 weeks ago, but all of a sudden feels like it's going to be a very different game the second time around, despite not that much time elapsing. We'll talk about the injuries that both of these teams are dealing with and how that shapes the matchups in this game and the big keys to victory for both sides. But Peter, I think Bears fans are all wondering about, well, I think we're wondering about health on both of these teams, but we know Micah Parsons is out. We're not sure about Christian Watson. We're not sure about Evan Williams. We're not sure about Zach Tom. What's the current status in Green Bay? What's the level of concern about just how banged up they're going to be?
Well, Matt LaFleur stopped short of saying it would be better if we just put who's healthy on the injury report, but that's what it felt like. He said the injury report is going to be substantial, was what he said before we got an injury report on Tuesday. When they faked practice, right? When they put out injury designations, but no one practiced. And so like it's a huge concern. Christian Watson got out on the field on Wednesday, which is a big boost. It is remarkable to anyone that's been following this. He went to the hospital, Lorin. Like he was in the Denver hospital. I'm sure they have multiple, but in a Denver hospital, getting checked out. And it turns out they've not said specifically what the injury is. They called it a chest injury. My understanding is that it is a sternoclavicular strain, but I've also heard, or sprain, but I've also heard that it could be an AC joint. Either way, it's the shoulder, it's the upper body, but it is not something that we're like, there's, real long-term concerns. He wants to play. Christian Watson wants to play. And this is a guy that recovered from ACL in 9 months, came back on the field, and was immediately the best Packers receiver again. And that's not damning with faint praise. Like he came back and was just immediately awesome for the Packers. Zach Tom and Evan Williams, though, seem like longer shots to play. Evan Williams in particular, we got reporting from Jeremy Fowler that could be a multiple week injury. And Zach Tom, the Packers have played without Zach Tom before. Anthony Belton started at right tackle early in the season. Darian Kennard came in during the game, but it could be former first-round pick Jordan Morgan. So they have some decisions to make on that. Christian Watson, I think if you ask me about any of the three, Christian Watson, I think is the most likely to play. I would put, like, if I got to put injury designations on those guys today, I would say like Christian Watson is questionable. The other two guys are probably doubtful as we head in here. But I have to flip this to you because we were texting about this earlier in the week. Rome Odunze, someone mentioned to me like, hey, did they mismanage this with Rome Odunze, trying to get him to play and then potentially having a setback? And now Luther Burden, 2 straight days as DNPs here too. So give me the lowdown on what's going on with these Bears receivers.
Yeah, so Rome Odunze's had a thing all season, and it's been kind of an ongoing thing that he's played through for the majority of the year. Initially, they designated a heel issue. Then it came out that it's some kind of stress fracture in the foot that sounds like it's not going to ever get 100% healthy until surgery. Like it's not going to happen in season that, if you just sit him for 2 weeks, he'll be a new man. It's like, no, it's kind of pain management and also just like re-injury risk of overcompensating and something worse happening in the foot. Yeah. And so Ben Johnson continues to say like they haven't ruled anything out there. There was talk of trying to just kind of shut him down until the playoffs and see if 3 or 4 more weeks of time off can get him ready to go for when the games really matter even more, or if there's a feeling like, well, 2 weeks off versus 4 weeks off doesn't make a difference. So, just kind of see how he's feeling on game day. But there is definitely an injury mismanagement question mark around this Bears team, because the week before the Rome Odunze thing, Kyler Gordon injured his calf in pregame warmups.
Right.
Out, and now he's on injured reserve, presumably for the rest of the season there. Like, they've had multiple situations where players get hurt in warmups or in practice, where like Jalen Johnson has come back and not look 100% since he's been out there. TJ Edwards was kind of slow getting back out there. So I certainly don't expect Rome Odunze to play on Saturday. And Luther Burden missing back-to-back practices is enough for me to feel like there's a pretty strong chance that's also not going to happen. So as much as the Packers have had some bigger name injuries all happening all at once, the Bears have had plenty of injuries too, and you're not getting a lot of sympathy, I think, from either fan base here.
No. Well, and look, I always respect this when fans say, we being the team that we cheer for in terms of the fans hearing, I'm speaking as the fan here now, we would rather beat you full strength than have, in 2010, I'm telling you with 100% certainty, Packers fans would have rather beat the Bears with Jay Cutler than Caleb Haney. And not that Bears fans have, and to their credit, no one was like, well, if we'd have had Jay Cutler, we'd have won. Like, I have not heard that from a Bears fan in 15 years. And so like, maybe those people exist out there. There's probably some, but that just like put a little pall over all of this. And that stinks, but that's also part of the deal. Like, this is a battle of attrition every single season. And unfortunately, most years it just comes down to who gets lucky with the injuries at the right time, who gets healthy at the right time. And can you get the right matchups here? So what's interesting is if I had to put money on it, Lorin, I would say Christian Watson is going to play on Saturday. And I think in a lot of ways, he's the most important of the guys who could potentially play, given what he did to the Bears the last time these two teams faced off. I mean, he had CJ Gardner-Johnson in absolute hell in the slot. And I think you would see that a lot in this matchup as well. There just is no true replacement for him. He has become Christian Watson. If you look at the underlying numbers, like the PFF grades, the yards per route run stuff, I think yards per route run is the stat in football. Like, I think no single stat captures a position's quality better than yards per route run at volume. And he's like top 10 in all of the receiver numbers since he's come back from injury. He's been a Pro Bowl caliber player since he's been back. Getting him back against the defense, the way we saw Jordan Love play the last time around, the way we saw Christian Watson play the last time around, to me, that's the guy that if he plays, I'll go, okay, I feel very comfortable picking the Packers in that situation. If you told me none of those guys were going to play, I might be sitting here going, I don't know if I can pick the Packers in a game like that.
And we should, I'm erred in not including Josh Jacobs in that list of injured players and Marshawn Lloyd, the running backs too. That we'll talk about them as we get going here. But that specific like Watson dynamic is one I'm really fascinated with from Dennis Allen's perspective as defensive coordinator, because I was frustrated going back through the Packers Bears all 22 and seeing that like pretty much every time they blitzed Jordan Love, they were just running man coverage behind it. Sometimes it was 0, sometimes it was 1, but like, I don't understand why you felt, especially you get burned once on it. Okay, I'll give you 1 of like, you're going to trust your guys, but he gets you one time with the speed and man coverage. And it's like, all right, let's maybe zone blitz, because they're not getting a 4-man rush. So they're trying to blitz Jordan Love. Jordan Love's great against the blitz, but it feels like it's even easier when you just run man coverage against it. So he can just see that he's got his guy one-on-one, lead him the ball in front of him and let him go run and get it. And like, they just kept sticking to man coverage. And we saw the Bears against the Browns this past weekend get burned twice on blitzes with man coverage against Isaiah Bond, similarly fast receiver, not nearly as overall talented. And so I'm like, all right, 2 weeks in a row, burned by man coverage blitz. Like, will they have learned for this game against Green Bay? Or if Watson doesn't play, do they feel more comfortable saying, no, we can stick with more man coverage on the blitz? But if Watson,
I don't want to preempt too much of the matchups, because I think that's a key one. Like, what does Dennis Allen do? Watch the Broncos. 75% almost zone coverage rate for one of the heaviest man coverage teams in the NFL. Now, that worked because their front four are full of MFers. Like, they've just got dudes on dudes on dudes to rush the passer, and Chicago doesn't. So I understand why Dennis Allen feels like, hey, we got to send guys. Like, this is going to be the new norm for Jeff Hafley too. He's going to feel like he's got to send bodies And so that's going to be, I think, a huge part of the storyline here. What I find most interesting about that too is, yeah, Christian Watson, like, he played well in the game, right? When you watched the All-22 as I did, every time Jordan Love had time to throw, guess what? There were 3 guys open, not just Christian Watson or not just the guy that the ball went to. There's 2 other guys on the backside of the concept also open. And so while I think Christian Watson, if he plays, like I said, I would feel comfortable picking the Packers. It's not like if he doesn't play, the other guys weren't getting open. Jaden Reed, Matthew Golden, Romeo Dobbs, like those guys were getting open too. It's can you protect? And then what is the plan from Dennis Allen? So we'll get into all of that. I don't want to preempt too much of the matchups part of this, because there's a ton of juicy stuff to get into here.
Yeah, let's get into that as we continue our Crossover Thursday Locked On Bears, Locked On Packers podcast. Today's Crossover Thursday podcast is brought to you by Prize Picks. This holiday season is one of the best times for sports, with bowl games and big basketball matchups, playoff pushes, certainly for both teams involved on Saturday. It's all happening all at once. And while we're all still making choices every day, one of the most fun places to make the right call is Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the easiest way to get in on daily fantasy. Just pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, lock in your lineup, and you're in the game. So maybe you can pick more or less on Jordan Love's passing yards or DJ Moore's receiving yards, or you can even go across sports to basketball or hockey or soccer or any of your other favorite sports, and you can win with making the right call. And the deposits and withdrawals are quick and easy to keep everything flowing. So download the Prize Picks app today and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. It's good to be right. All right, Peter, we started hinting at some of these matchups in terms of how these teams are going to adjust to injuries not being out there as we continue our Crossover Thursday podcast. And I wanted to also get to, like, you hinted at Jeff Hafley's probably going to need to be a little bit more aggressive from a pass rush standpoint without Micah Parsons. I certainly think of all the injuries, he's the individually most impactful in terms of, like, the game plan has to change for both sides of that matchup. Are you anticipating all right brand new blitz scheme, or just like a slightly dialed up? Like, have we seen any examples of what they might do without Micah at this point?
Yeah, it's called the 2024 season. This was something that we saw early in the year. Let's just rewind back into time. In September of 2024, we thought the Packers were Rashawn Gary, Kenny Clark, Devontae Wyatt, Lucas Van Ness, Carl Brooks, that they had this stable of young, ascending outside and inside pass rushers that they were going to be able to rush with 4 and manage in the back end. We didn't know Xavier McKinney was going to be the player that he turned out to be. We didn't know Evan Williams was going to be the player he turned out to be. And by about the middle of the year, it became clear they just could not get pressure with 4. And what's interesting is I had Evan Williams on Locked On Packers a couple of times last year, Lorin, and I kind of put it to him. I was like, hey, you guys are leaning into a lot of this Brian Flores simulated pressure, cover 2, non-traditional Tampa coverage disguises stuff that the Bears do too, by the way. Packers scored on one of the non-traditional Tampa looks because Jalen Johnson didn't get enough depth. And I was like, did you just watch the Vikings film and say, let's try some of that stuff? And he was like, I'm not going to say that's what we did, but I'm also not going to say that's not what we did. And so it's like, it is a copycat league for a reason. That stuff works. And I gave the stats the other day. This year against cover 2, the NFL got 29 touchdowns and 47 interceptions as a league. Wow. So it's like when teams are playing cover 2, and in particular, the non-traditional Tampa has just been a highly effective changeup because no one plays it except the Vikings. No one just lives in cover 2 anymore. This is not 1998 with Monty Kiffin and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and all that stuff. So it has really been an effective tool. Well, the Packers last year played cover 2 more than any team in the NFL. And part of that was to hide the corners. Part of that was it's a hard, like, against especially middle to lower tier quarterbacks, you got to make those seam throws with Edgerrin Cooper and Quay Walker in the middle of the field, one of those 2 guys running the post, or you got to hit those hole shots on the outside if you want to create explosive plays. Otherwise, it's checkdowns all day. And so that's a tough way to live. And it's not they don't really have the corners to play some of that matchy quarters, Vic Fangio stuff that, the Texans, for example, specialize in, along with that man coverage. So I expect to see more simulated pressures. I expect to see more actual A-gap pressures and stunts and twists and all kinds of stuff. Remember, Lorin, as of like August 25th, Micah Parsons did not play for the Green Bay Packers. So the Packers, Jeff Hafley and Matt LaFleur spent an entire offseason from January until August planning for essentially this group of guys. So they had a plan. They worked it in mini camps. They worked it in training camps. And then Micah came and they had to upend all of it and they reworked their defense on the fly. But Jeff Hafley said on Wednesday, show this team some adversity and they're going to respond. And I think that that's true. We saw them in the middle of last year change on the fly the way they played defense because teams stopped attacking them down the field. And so like, okay, we got to figure out some other stuff to do here. And it worked. I mean, go back to the Philly game. They had Devontae Smith and AJ Brown in shackles that whole game. I mean, in straitjackets that whole game. And Jalen Hurts, they kept him in the pocket. They made him play quarterback. I think that plan here is going to be very similar. Let Caleb sit in the pocket and try and play quarterback. Don't let him get outside the pocket. You almost have to treat him at this point, Lorin, I think, like a running quarterback, where like he's more dangerous, kind of like the prime Aaron Rodgers, which fits, right? That was his favorite player growing up, where you have to treat him as more dangerous outside the pocket than from the pocket. And so maybe we see some mush rush, some interior pressure. I don't look, Jeff Hafley gets paid all the monies to figure this out.
Yeah.
The thing is I think Dennis Allen has to face the same question. Like, this is who we are. This is what we want to be. But the last time we did it, we got killed doing it. So how much do you want to deviate from what you do this week against the Packers? Like, what do you think? Like, if you were advising Dennis Allen, if he asked you, if he called and said, hey, what kind of changeups can we throw? What would you say?
Yeah, so I always find Dennis Allen to be stuck in between a rock and a hard place. He's got this eternal lose-lose battle where you got to take a risk one way or the other, and there's no perfect solution here, right? It's you rush 4, you're not getting any pressure, so the quarterback sits in the pocket and has all day to slice and dice your secondary that's also dealing with some injuries. Or you blitz and then you only have, 6 or 5 guys back in coverage, so there's more space for the receiver, and if their blitz doesn't get home and get right to the quarterback immediately, he's going to burn you for a big play behind you. So do you go down swinging, or do you go down, if you play conservative enough, you make him have to go 10 or 12 plays downfield, and maybe you hope he makes a mistake on one of those 10 or 12 plays, or do you hope that he makes a mistake on that blitz where you maybe try and disguise the coverage a little bit, or he doesn't see where the rusher is coming from, or somebody pops out at the last second or bats a pass. So I think it's all about like risk tolerance and risk management there, as far as when and where you pull each string. That maybe in certain longer down and distance situations, you feel like you can just rush 4 and sit back and say, hey, they might complete something easy over the middle, but they're not going to get the 15 yards they need because we trust that we can come up and tackle. But if it's 2nd and 2 and you think they're going to take a shot, maybe you need to bring the blitz to make sure he doesn't have time to sit there and take that shot. So I can't give Dennis Allen the game plan that's like, hey, here's exactly when you do and when you don't. But I hope that he's smart and experienced enough to have a better feel for when and where and how to be able to do that. Because at times I think it has worked, certainly has worked against other quarterbacks. Jordan Love's been pretty good at knowing when it's coming and standing in there and delivering a winnable pass. Like, it felt like the first Bears-Packers game, the main Packers stops came on drives where the Packers had a penalty or Jordan Love missed a receiver. And it happened a couple times, and those were the Bears' main stops in that game. So I don't know how to get more all of a sudden.
That's the thing, is I went back and as impressed as I was with Jordan Love in the game, outside of the one throw that by the way, he said, bad read, but the ball also came out weird when he threw it, the one that went right to the defender on the interception. But like he took 2 shots to Romeo Doubs down the rail. And if you look at the single coverage, that's my guy. I'm going to give him a shot. I mentioned this earlier. You look at the concept side, both of the other guys are open on the backside. And so it's just like, just play the play. And if you can protect, I feel like it's going to be effective more often than not. One last thing on the matchups part of this I wanted to ask you about, Lorin, because in the second half, I believe the number is over 70% of Caleb Williams' passes against the Packers were off play action. And last week, I believe it was over 60%, if I'm not mistaken, depending on who's charting these things. They clearly believe that this is the best way to get this offense going, and teams are very much afraid of the run. And so it makes sense to get to that. That is a core part of what the Lions do. Jared Goff led the NFL last year in play action attempts. So this is a core part of Ben Johnson. And I think people are reading a little too much into he doesn't trust Caleb Williams stuff. I think there are some questions that Ben Johnson has about Caleb Williams, but like if Ben Johnson had his druthers, I think he'd call 70% of play action passes if he could. The problem is on 3rd and 8, you can't really call play action. Although against the Packers, he did a couple times, like on 3rd and medium to long, call play action passes, which I thought was hilarious. But like, is this just the new normal for the Bears, or is this just something that they're working through?
So I think maybe the single biggest factor there was Parsons and Myles Garrett the last 2 weeks of like, we got a play action. So
the first half of that game was unbelievable.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's such an emphasis and like shapes everything you want to do on offense for this team. I mean, they're rolling out away from him a bunch and they're trying to slow him down with chips and protections and stuff. Now that Parsons is not a factor in this game, then all of a sudden, does that give Ben Johnson more freedom to open up? Well, it would if you had Rome Odunze and Luther Burden, but if you're going to Devin Duvernay and Olamide Zaccheaus as 2 of your top 3 wide receivers, I wonder if
DJ Moore has not exactly been 2007 Randy Moss this season.
Not exactly, but last week was his best game yet. Yeah. So I think they're just going to run a lot of 2 and 3 tight end sets. I think you'll see them to compensate. And I think that's going to be one of the bigger differences between these two matchups is like they were running some against Parsons to just like block him, but now they're going to use those as more like, hey, we can pass out of this a little bit more as well and like use those guys as weapons. And that's going to be one of the big keys to victory for Chicago in this game, how they can get other receivers involved or get the offense rolling without some of the same talent at wide receiver. So we'll take a look at what both teams need to do to secure a victory on Saturday night. Next on our Crossover Thursday, Locked On Bears, Locked On Packers podcast. I do want to thank you again for making Locked On Bears and Locked On Packers your first listens of the day. Hopefully you're an everydayer. If you want to join the Everydayers Club as well, you can listen to each of these shows ad-free. If you go to lockedonbears.supercast.com or lockedonpackers.supercast.com, you can get the everyday ad-free version of Locked On Bears and Locked On Packers. But we're going to still be for you here, free and open to listen to on all the platforms every day. Anyway, getting you ready for, still weird to say, Saturday night's big matchup between these two teams.
Don't forget Locked On Sports Today. Don't forget that. Locked On Sports Today, our all sports flagship show you get with your Everydayer Club membership. So you get 2 for the price of 1.
Well, I heard the host of that show isn't any good. But
yeah.
But
that's mom listens. That's enough.
The Bears are 1.5 point underdogs at home right now on FanDuel Sportsbook. The books think the Packers are still the favorite team, despite the injuries and despite, I mean, it's very, very small, but still, considering Green Bay was 7-point favorites the first time, and now it's 1.5. They're still.
It opened at 2.5, right? So like that kind of makes sense. Like if you think about it, home field advantage is 1.5. So what I was trying to explain is on a neutral site, Packers probably 5.5 point favorites 2 weeks ago. In Chicago, probably 3.5 point favorites. Then they lost Micah Parsons. So that I think it makes sense that number comes down. It opened at 2.5 though, so not that much, and has been bet to 1.5 now. So we'll see.
See, I get this feeling around Packers media, fans, and the team would never say, but like this real demoralization from these injuries. This feeling of like kind of, pack it up, like not like you're tanking the rest of the season, but just like, well, your hopes of the Super Bowl are gone. So why does this really matter? And Peter, is there any concern of like when Matt LaFleur does a press conference and spends most of the time talking about, all these guys are going to be gone. Is there like an undertone there of like, is there any concern about energy and like not buy-in per se, but just like there being this big letdown of like, oh geez, oh woe is us a little bit, even if not verbally?
If they were doing anything this week other than playing the Bears in Chicago, I would say yes. But because of the second half, the last time these two teams played, the way that it ended, the feeling that the Packers had in that game, the chippiness that they then carried into Denver, by the way, if Bears fans were not paying attention, there was a pre-game scrap in Denver between the Packers and the Browns. Like these two teams don't hate each other. Like these two teams don't even know each other.
They just saw Packers orange and got confused.
I mean, look, maybe there's some like color blindness. I don't quite know what happened there, but like it's one of those things where Jeff Hafley spoke on Wednesday, and if it weren't Jeff Hafley, and if I hadn't seen this defense in particular fly around all season long and play with that sort of swagger and attitude, and then after Micah Parsons goes out, like let's not forget this. In the last 5 minutes, the Packers got 2 fourth-down stops against the Broncos to give the Packers offense a chance to go down and tie the game and send it to overtime. Now, the Packers offense at that point they could not protect Jordan Love. He was DOA on those plays. Like if you go back and watch, especially like the 3rd and 15 and 4th and 15s, like he just has no shot. He gets to his back foot and there's someone in his lap on both of those plays. But it's just, they kept fighting, they kept playing, and that's who these guys are. They're just, they have a different attitude this year than I have seen, I would say, since 2019, and maybe 2021, but that team didn't feel the same defensively as this team does in terms of just the attitude that they play with. And Jordan Love is such a calming force in all of this. Like, I think that they've seen Jordan Love this year ascend to a level of quarterback play where you just feel like if he's your quarterback, you have a chance to win every week. And I think that it's not, he will not be Aaron Rodgers level in all likelihood, in terms of like, well, we've got Aaron, like we can beat anybody. But I do think that gives everybody a little bit more of that confidence to say, like, this is the same team basically that we had August 15th, for the team to be able to look at themselves in the mirror and go, this is the team we thought we could win the Super Bowl with in August. So why not now? And I think I think if it was the Ravens, I'd be worried about a letdown. If they were playing I was going to say the Steelers, but like Aaron Rodgers probably gives them enough juice to carry that through. But like the Bears it's the perfect week. It's the perfect opponent on a short week, no less, to just like, let's just wash the taste out of your mouths and go and fight. Like that's the thing here that I think for the Packers. Now, the other side of that for the Bears, Lorin, is they didn't get the first one. And I'm sure they felt like they could have and should have. Is there an added sense of urgency, do you think, from the Bears because of the way the first game went? And I guess the crucial follow-up is, do you think that matters?
Yeah, so I will say in the post-game locker room after they beat the Browns on Sunday, one of the Bears players got the game ball. I think it was the linebacker, DeMarco Jackson. In his post-game speech says, like, they just finished beating the Browns. He goes, now we got to go get that bad taste out of our mouth on Saturday. Like, immediately, the Browns game is over, and it's like, Packers. We lost the Packers. We got to go beat the Packers. So very much focused there. Does that? I don't think it makes that much of a difference, because I think it's just as much as they were the first time, and that energy and intensity and focus and desire is not going to be what separates them from winning and losing this game. Yeah. I think for me, it's going to be about kind of, well, first of all, I think Ben Johnson's going to need to scheme his butt off with the receiver deficiencies that they have. Like, he's going to have to manufacture open routes.
Colston Loveland game, right?
What's that again?
Colston Loveland game.
Yes. I think we're going to see a lot of Colston Loveland. I think we're going to see more Cole Kmet, a lot of DJ Moore, obviously, but they're going to want to lead in the running game and just say, like, I don't know that my receivers are going to be able to create the separation for me. So I got to make sure that conceptually other routes are creating space that receiver can just run into, as opposed to guy. Like if I'm Green Bay, I wouldn't mind man-to-man coveraging quite a bit here. You help out on DJ Moore, but let those other guys try and beat you and keep Caleb Williams in the pocket. I think that would go a long way. But if they could just not beat themselves in that regard and not get behind and down a distance from penalties, certainly not turning the ball over on the last throw of the game would make a big difference. Like, I don't think Chicago feels like they have to do a bunch of stuff drastically different from the first time, but just kind of like simple, like slow things down, play your game a little bit more, and you can hold on for a potential victory.
Yeah, I don't know if you're going to see a bunch of man coverage specifically, but I do think you will see them more willing to play press, which is something we saw last year. They when you play cover 2, if you're going to play Tampa, like, you press up on the outside. Bears fans, and they watched the Bears play that Tampa 2 for years, Lovie Smith and all that good stuff with Brian Urlacher. You can play physical on the outside. And so if it's going to be Zacchaeus and DJ Moore is probably going to play a lot in the slot, then you obviously you can't press in the slot the same sort of way. But I think the Packers, if Evan Williams doesn't play, they have a good answer with Javon Bullard, who was, I think it's easy to forget now, the no doubt day one starter as a safety last year before they had to move him to the slot. He was really he played awesome in the Bears game 2 weeks ago. I mean, he was flying around. They signed Nate Hobbs, who's not been able to get back on the field because he was not good as a boundary corner. He's really a slot corner. That's his best position. So I think they have some answers there. To me, for the Packers, you have to contain Caleb Williams in the pocket, and you have to protect Jordan Love. Those are the things. Like, I think I said this before the Bears game the first time, if you protect Jordan Love, you will win, because I just don't think the secondary is good enough, even without Christian Watson, frankly, to hold up down to down, play to play. And I think we saw that play out in a lot of ways. You mentioned it. It was the Packers' penalties and their own mistakes that kept them from winning the game. And so that would be if I'm going to give 3 keys to victory here,
Wow.
it would be the penalties, because last week that was a huge story. They finally get a holding penalty for Micah Parsons, and then they commit a bonehead personal foul penalty. The first field goal of the game 2 weeks ago only happens because Keyshawn Nixon gets called for a personal foul penalty, which was nonsense, by the way. And then another penalty. I think the Bears, I think they created 18 yards of offense on that drive, and it was 30 yards of penalties from the Packers, or maybe even more. So that's the other part of it, is just don't beat yourself. And I think both teams feel that way. Both teams feel like if they play their games, they're going to win. And that's what makes this fun, because it's probably the first time since 2018, at least, that both teams could say that. And I'm not even sure the 2018 could say that for the Packers.
Yeah, it's certainly a sign of how the times have changed, and it's been fun to look at how much these two teams have changed just in 2 weeks since these two teams played last. But it's going to be a great Saturday night matchup for us to break down for you right here on the Locked On Packers and Locked On Bears podcast. So make sure you hit the subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to the podcast. Tune in tomorrow as we get our final previews together and maybe have more concrete injury updates. I mean, we'll see how the week goes on here. If any big news changes, you can be sure we'll have it covered for you on our respective shows, and then we'll break it all down for you afterwards. So for Peter Bukowski from Locked On Packers, I'm Lorin Cox from Locked On Bears, and we will talk to you again tomorrow.